Summerlee was sitting in the back seat with her daughter, Izzy, who had been recently diagnosed with 22q. Her and her husband were driving to another doctor's appointment, and they were feeling exhausted, tired, and confused about everything that was being thrown at them. And in that moment, they decided to create a place, a blog, and a website for other parents to learn about 22q and not feel so isolated. This was the beginning of the 22qt.com idea, and I'm so honored to introduce you to Summerlee. Welcome to the 22q podcast. My name is Becky White, and today I am thrilled to have Summerlee here with us. She is a mom and an advocate, a very new mom, and her story is very unique in the sense that after she had her daughter, she created a blog post and a website to raise awareness around 22q. And Summerlee, thank you so much for being on, and please tell us about yourself.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I am Summerlee. I am a mom of 3. So I have 2 boys and then our Izzy. The boys are both 7. One is biologically mine, and then the other is biologically my partner's. And then we have Izzy together, but we all live here full time together. So it's a crazy household. But I am a licensed school counselor. I'm lucky though, this year I'm working from home. So the flexibility that allows me to do everything I need to do with Izzy for her medical appointments is wonderful. So that's a huge blessing. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's great. And tell us about Izzy. Tell us about your journey with 22q.
So Izzy is a year and a half now. She was born July 1st, 2021. My pregnancy was pretty typical. They had me do some extra testing just because I was like at the 30-year-old threshold. And at one point they did find an abnormality on the ultrasound on her heart. However, we went and saw a specialist multiple times, and they ended up ruling everything out and telling us that everything was okay. 2020 hindsight, they were only looking for Down syndrome. So we were nervous and scared at the first hearing about that, but then totally relieved, thinking everything was okay. We had our daughter C-section, but it was scheduled, no complications. And we brought her home and she was perfect and adorable. And then about 4 to 5 days of having her home, we would hold her and the seizure would happen. And it started small and gradually got larger as a couple days went on. And finally, at one point I was holding her in the living room and she had a big one, and I recorded it. So called the doctor. We went to her pediatrician, who right away sent us to neurology at Akron Children's Hospital. We thought we would be there for maybe a couple hours of testing. And I mean, we didn't want a seizure disorder, but that's what we thought we were going in for. And we ended up there for 18 days. And in that time, she had loads of testing done, and amongst other procedures and labs and everything else. But at one point they brought in a geneticist. She asked about the seizures, and that kind of triggered her brain to point to 22q, and no one had said those words before. And so we had no idea what she was talking about, but they did a chromosomal microarray blood test on her, and it came back positive. And that was, days into already being at the hospital.
So she's seizing.
Yes.
You take her to the hospital. They start doing tests. What were the initial thoughts? Had you ever heard of 22q prior to Izzy?
No, we had never heard of 22q. And to be honest, the only person at the hospital who seemed to have heard of 22q, that actual terminology, the 22q.11, was the geneticist. Now, when people started bringing up the term DeGeorge, we had other doctors know a little bit about what was going on in their specialty area in regards to DeGeorge. But our geneticist, who I love dearly, she was very clear on the differences between 22q and DeGeorge, which Izzy does fall into both because she has immune deficiency. That's part of her health. we had never heard of 22q, and when we started Googling, I wish I had stopped. Because we didn't really have answers for Izzy's specific 22q at that point. So what we were reading, like at one point, Sterling is her dad, at one point he was like, you got to put the phone down, like it's gonna drive us insane. So no, we had never heard of it, and that was scary.
Right. And as you're in the hospital for those 18 days, what were they?
Yes, so she had a lot going on. They put her on feeding tubes. She had breathing difficulties. So her oxygen levels, she was desatting at all the time. Actually, at one point she coded. And so that was horrific. We are very fortunate because her heart is built completely backwards, but it functions typical.
Wow.
So she does not see a cardiologist at this time, which is huge. She has 11 specialists, but one is not a cardiologist. Let's see, she has endocrinologist. So they were checking her calcium and phosphorus and parathyroid hormone, which were all off, which the calcium and phosphorus caused the seizures, which is what we had learned. She saw GI and nutrition because, and speech, actually, GI, nutrition, and speech. We're testing her swallow and her reflux and her bowels. Obviously, the geneticist was doing her blood work. Immunology came because of her low T cell count. So they were checking her T cells, but also whenever she would have, like, she had 2 spinal taps back to back, which wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And immunology had to get involved at that point because they were worried then that she had an infection. It's bad for anybody, but especially if you don't have the immune system to properly handle it.
Right.
Neurology was obviously involved, and she had more EKGs than I can even recall. And then I think the last one at that point at the hospital, she had a plastic surgeon who we still see because she was born with a smaller than typical jaw. But we are also very thankful because within the past couple of months, it has started to grow. And so now it's measuring neutral, and we at this time no longer have to worry about any surgeries there. So
wow, that's great.
she never underwent like an operation at the hospital, but she underwent multiple testing and procedures, whether it was, the spinal taps or the blood draws or the EKGs or the swallow studies, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. And with the feeding tube, what was happening there?
So she couldn't keep anything down, and they didn't know whether it was a reflux issue or if there was something wrong with like her esophagus or her trachea or something like that. So she was tested for all of that, and thankfully there was nothing there, and her swallow study showed normal responses. So we think it was just, she's very small, so we think everything inside of her is also very small, and so it was just hard for her to swallow and keep things down. But she was on like 3 different feeding tubes, and she is mighty. She was little, but she was pulling them out, and so they had to keep replacing them. But that was ultimately our goal, was they were going to release us from the hospital once she proved she could eat off of the feeding tube, which she did on day 17. So day 18, we were like, we got to go.
Wow. So
Yeah.
what day was it when the geneticist finally made the distinction that she had 22q?
It was July 22nd.
Wow, you know the
We got the
day.
confirmed results. Yes.
Wow.
And she went in on July 13th. So day 9.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And when you got that diagnosis and all of this is happening, what was your initial reaction?
Initial reaction was denial. And then that came and went pretty quickly. And so then my initial reaction was fear and anger, but that was, that was for lots of reasons. So,
right. What were some of those reasons?
oh, I was just like angry that God would like bring a child into this world and who was going to have to face challenges. Like, that didn't make sense to me. And I was angry with how things were going at the hospital, to be honest, because nobody had answers for us. And like I said, I love our geneticist, and she printed out papers and everything for education purposes for her dad and I, but to be honest, like we were our own resource. So almost everything that we know about our daughter and about 22 cues from our own research, that was frustrating,
Yeah.
which I guess
It,
turned out to be a blessing in disguise because now we're trying to help others. But
yeah. So how is Izzy doing now?
Izzy's doing wonderful now. She has, I think I mentioned, she has 11 specialists plus her pediatrician. But her appointments with her specialists are so much more spaced out now because at one point, I mean, we were going every day to see somebody, and she was getting labs drawn every week, which has caused very early doctor anxiety, it's a lot to handle, especially with like a 1.5-year-old when I can't reason with her. That has been challenging.
What will she do when she finds out she's going to the doctors?
So it literally, when we walk into the door, she starts crying. She will cry the entire time that she's on the table, or even like sometimes even if I'm holding her, depending on which doctor we're seeing. And obviously if there's labs involved. And as soon as that visit is over and we leave the door, she stops. She's very smart.
Yeah.
Her understanding and comprehension is excellent. Her dad and I might be biased, but we think it's excellent. She has just kind of learned that fear, unfortunately, which I hope goes away, but I know it's a lot on us, it's a lot on her. Still getting labs, but day-to-day routine is, she eats fine. She drinks fine. She loves eating and drinking. She spends the days with her grandparents while her dad and I work. And we take the time we need to take her to her appointments whenever they may be. And so right now we have very few concerns compared to where we were like a year ago, which is amazing.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yes.
It breaks my heart hearing that she's having trauma
Yes.
for the
And I
doctors.
always say when we go to any doctor really, and she's like losing it, I tell them she has doctor anxiety. And they look at me like, okay, lady, she's a 1.5 years old. Like she's just crying because of her age. I'm like, no, it's true. Like she sees you, she sees what you have in your hands, and she's putting two and two together because she's been through so much.
She's been through so much. She has trauma. She's
Yes.
remembering everything.
Yes. I'm like, and I think I wrote in one of my posts a long time ago, she has been through more in her short little life than most people would go through in their entire life.
And she's so lucky to have you as her advocate
Thank you.
because it's true. Our children go through so much, and it's very easy to forget how much they've had to endure in those first couple of years of life.
Yeah.
And she's still very young. And the fact that she's already picking up on where she is and recognizing signs of, oh my goodness, this is the place where I've had to do an EKG before. I didn't like that, so I'm going to cry. So
Yep.
what has been helpful for you in those situations? Has there been anything that can maybe calm her down or talk her through before going to an appointment?
Not really, but I guess what gets us through is the doctors that she sees. Her dad and I actually like hand selected them because we were at Akron Children's for so long. For those like 3 weeks, we got to meet a lot of people within each specialty area. When it came down to moving from inpatient to outpatient, we learned very quickly, obviously, that advocating was huge. So it was my whole intention to tell them which doctor we would be seeing. That was important to me. That was important to us. And because of that, and because of the doctors we have chosen to work with, I feel like our rapport is very strong, and the doctors get it and they understand and they love Izzy. And so what gets us through those appointments is we make them fast. We do what we need to do and we're done. They know that she doesn't want to be there. They don't want to torture her, obviously.
Do you remember or recall the first time you really spoke up for her, maybe in the hospital or at a doctor's appointment?
Yes. So at the hospital, I was very vocal. I think like to a point where probably the nurses were like fighting over who didn't come to our room. But I was also, and I said, this is a very delicate situation, being on the other side, like put yourself in our shoes. This is your at that time, 2-week-old daughter, 2-week-old baby. And when she coded, we truly thought like we're not leaving here with a baby, you know? I would say probably from that point on, although it may have been even earlier than the coding, during their rounds, they would talk like amongst themselves really outside of the door. And so we made it a point to be a part of the rounds. I had my notes on my phone, and every single day I wrote down what they were discussing, and then what the follow-ups would be. And if that changed, then you have to come in and have a conversation with us about the change, because that didn't always happen at the beginning. Things were just on their schedule and their time. And I'm sure with everything that needed to happen, probably there's some questionable moments as well. But that was my thing. Like if there's a change in your schedule with my daughter, then I'm the person you talk to before that
Absolutely.
change happens.
Right.
Yeah. And
Right.
then her dad, Sterling, he's much less vocal than I am. He has more patience in that area. But it came to a point where, and it was during one of the rounds where he like stood up and I was like, "Oh, you're about to hear the wrath now." And he was, you know, on one where he was like, "We're switching hospitals, we're switching providers." And ultimately we didn't do that, and we found the people that work wonderful with us. But it it came to a point of like you cannot have a conversation and for the how the day is going to go or how the week is going to go without including us.
Absolutely. It's very hard to be an advocate, especially when you're in the hospital for more than 3 days. And once you pass that 3-day mark, I don't know about you, but I know that I turned into a protective mom that just wanted answers, and to make sure that these poking and prodding and blood tests and
Yes.
EKGs and x-rays were completely necessary,
Yes.
because I just couldn't take it anymore. Did you have the same feeling?
Absolutely. There was one point where I mentioned how she had the back-to-back spinal taps, and that was actually medical error because they forgot to collect something the first time. The tubes were left on the counter. And her dad, during the spinal tap procedures, had left to get our boys. Um, and so I was there by myself, and they had put me obviously in a different room because I couldn't be in the sterile room. And it was taking so long, and I just had this thought, and this was during the first one, and I just had this thought like something is wrong, like it no one's coming out to talk to me, but something is not right, this should be over. And I went to the secretary's desk, and where Izzy's room was, from the secretary desk I could see the windows, but they had closed the curtains. And I said like I'm going in there, so they can either do it with me in there or they can stop the procedure because something isn't right. It does not take this long to do a spinal tap. Who then told me that they were going to stop. I could enter. And then I heard whispering amongst staff members. And I saw who I just knew was in charge of somebody because of the way that she was dressed and the way she was pointing and talking. But no one was talking to me. And I was just like, okay, stop. What's going on? They told me there was a mess up. They had to do a second spinal tap. And I I lost my cool. And just like you said, the poking and the prodding, like this is a delicate baby. I know you do stuff like this all the time. Same thing with IVs, like I understand you do IVs all of the time, but she's a baby. She's my baby. Her veins are very little because everything about her is very little. And we have asked, and it's like in this category of the IVs, we asked over and over for a specialty team where they, bring in the lights and do their magic and they get it done. And a nurse denied us, saying that they didn't have that. And we knew that wasn't true. And so we told them, you will not do any more IVs until you bring in the magicians who get the work done in a timely manner. And they didn't agree with our, stopping them from trying to, find the vein and do whatever they were doing. But we put our foot down, like, you can't keep poking her. You cannot do that. So they brought in their specialty team, and guess what? Got it in the first try.
Yeah, we had the same thing at Boston Children's, sitting there watching it happen. And then eventually you're just like, something happens as a parent and caregiver. You're just like, no, stop.
Yes. And we were also very lucky because some of the medical staff became advocates with us in regards to other medical staff, if that makes sense. So they actually were going to do a third spinal tap. And as they were prepping her because of issues that were going on, we kept saying, like, I don't think this should be happening. Can we give it 24 hours? I don't know. Or can we not do it at all? Like, is this absolutely necessary? Like you had mentioned. And thank God, her neurologist, who I adore, came in and stopped them and said, like, absolutely not. You wouldn't do this on an adult. You're not doing it on an infant. And it's not absolutely necessary at this point. So and that's when I hand selected him as our neurologist for outpatient. And we had some nurses too, my nurses, there was 5 of them. I wrote them thank you notes when we left because they were like angels on earth. And every single day I knew their schedules. And so I would give the charge nurse who we would be seeing. And they accommodated that, thank goodness. And those nurses became our advocates as well. And that was very helpful, knowing we had people on our side within the hospital as well.
It's so true. They are angels on earth. And I want to make it clear that we are not bashing medical professionals.
No, not at all.
We love them. We need them. They are so important. And they
Yes.
deal with an array of parents, I'm sure, that don't give them the respect that they deserve. But we're talking about more advocacy for your child, especially when they're brand new,
Yes.
and how hard it is for us as parents to find that voice in a proper way to support.
Absolutely. And I am so thankful for the doctors that we have found that continue to work with Izzy.
How is she doing now? What is she like? What are some of her quirks, and then maybe what are some of her things she's working on, like PT, speech? How is she? Give us a picture of who she is.
So she is, like I said, she's petite, but she is small but mighty in many ways. She is vocal. She doesn't have words, but she's vocal and non-vocal with what she wants, and she will get what she wants. Her understanding and comprehension of how her dad and I talk to her is out of this world. Like, she fully knows how to answer questions using her nonverbal skills. She loves Mickey and Minnie. She loves learning from Miss Rachel, which is this YouTube sensation that we found. She does work with a developmental specialist from Help Me Grow because she was delayed a little bit in her crawling. Now she's delayed a little bit in her walking. She does always meet her milestones, just a few months behind. We also were working with speech therapy, but that was for feeding. She graduated from speech therapy and nutrition at the end of 2022. So if we do see speech delays in the near future or the future, wherever it may fall, she will continue working with Help Me Grow in that regard. And they also have a speech therapist on deck for us with her plastic surgeon team if we need that.
And now knowing that it's 22Q, you can definitely learn and find things that in our community tend to happen and may or may not happen, and look for them. But yeah. I would love for you to share more about when you came up with the concept for your website, and share My 22QT with us, and, tell me how you came up with the idea.
Okay. So Izzy was born in July 2021, diagnosed July 22nd, 2021. And in September, her dad and I were driving to an outpatient visit at Akron Children's. And we, just like any other car ride, having conversation. And I was sitting in the back with her because she couldn't do car rides very well because of her breathing and because of her breathing difficulties. So anyways, I was sitting in the back with her and he was driving, and just like randomly, one of us said, like, this sucks. Like that was just the blanket statement. And I said, I wish I could like help other parents, because no one should, you know, be in a situation or feel like this, but these situations exist and these feelings exist. And he said something like, oh, well, you're really good at writing. So what if you started a blog? And I was like, oh, yeah, I kind of like that idea. And literally from that conversation, he is much more technical than I am. So he helped me in getting the website up and everything that we needed. But I started writing from the notes that I took at the hospital. And I was very detailed with my notes, so I knew exactly what happened on every day. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start by sharing our story of the 18 days in the hospital. And I'm going to, put out a blog post and see if it's helpful for anybody. Start sharing those blog posts turned into starting this whole website called My 22 Cutie. We went live with the website this is our 1 year mark. So in January of 2022, people from all over were so supportive, because at that point we had not even shared her diagnosis except for with our immediate family. We kind of had this battle, actually, between us, like, do we share with with others her diagnosis, because we don't want it to be used as an excuse or something that people like maybe look down on her for, and we don't want to do that to her. But in the same sense, to us, it was extremely important that the word get out there about this diagnosis, because it's really not as rare as people think it is. You may never heard of 22q, but it's the second most prevalent genetic disorder, second down from Down syndrome. We taught ourselves everything we needed to know. We wanted to raise awareness for it. We wanted to help other families and individuals who may be in the same situation. And we also wanted to pay it forward, because the people who helped us have changed our lives for the better, and have made what seemed like an impossible situation possible. And so, yes, we started My 22 Cutie. We share Izzy's journey. We share the facts about the 22q diagnosis from all spectrums of wherever you may lie. It's the whole 22q diagnosis.
Right.
And then we also raise funds for the genetics division of Akron Children's Hospital. So our mission has the 3 points. So our mission is to raise awareness for 22q, to pay it forward, and to help families cope and find understanding.
I love that.
Thank you.
Because honestly, in my first year, I could have never have thought of starting a website and a blog. For me, I was in deep denial, depression, because I was trying to navigate this world, as we all do as 22q parents. We felt like we were alone, my husband and I. Okay. And we've had those conversations of, this sucks. I hate that our son has to suffer through this. I hate that, he can't enjoy just being a baby. So I hear you. And
yes. And it was, I think what got it really set in stone and going was the writing of everything that happened became extremely therapeutic for me. So I don't love what happened by any means, but I do love sharing it, because I do think it is helpful, and it's helpful for others, and it's helpful for myself.
That's wonderful. The writing is extremely therapeutic, especially when you're going through something so traumatic, and it's almost hard for your brain to comprehend what is going on until you get it down on paper to try to figure out what's going on, or in the computer. And from starting this amazing website, have you had any encounters that made you smile or made you just say, wow, we're reaching people? Have you had any of those moments?
Yes. So, obviously our family and friends have been extremely supportive throughout all of it. Peers from our past and present will contact us and be like, oh my gosh, how can I help? Yada, yada. But also, we have had individuals from other countries and across the United States reach out to us via social media. And all of them have been parents of young ones with 22q, except one person was an adult with 22q. They have reached out and either thanked us for sharing the stories, told us that we're inspirations or that Izzy is an inspiration to what they're going through. And I have been able to have one-on-one conversations with parents of newborns who have just been recently diagnosed. And I have been able to share with them my experience and answer their specific questions, which has just been really cool to know that, it's not just my mom and dad going on my website and reading all the posts, but like it's international, which feels awesome that we're helping others even in just like the words that we write. So
you're achieving your goal of just being able to
yes,
help a community.
it's become my sole passion to raise awareness for 22q.
That's so amazing. How much have you changed in the past year and a half from all of
I
this?
would say that Izzy has taught me to not live within a bubble and to like truly make every moment count, because you never know what's going to happen. I am more understanding of all people. Was the unknown and guilt. We, through our research learned that 90% of the time this diagnosis is random. It's not caused by anything. We did not get blood testing done, but we have two typical boys. And so we believe that we're in that 90% of it just being a random cause. But that was very hard for myself to not blame myself, because I was the one carrying her. So I dealt with that challenge of feeling guilty. And like I said, the unknown, because at that time I felt like no one was giving us answers, or at least no one was giving me answers I wanted. Now I would say the challenge that I face is not thinking about the future. If I think too much into the future and focus on little things that worry me, then that will that's just going to destroy everything. That's going to destroy me, her, it all. And so, like I said, staying in the moment and focusing on the small wins, like, her taking 2 steps unassisted is small but mighty, just like her. So I would say that's my biggest challenge now, navigating, is not thinking about the future, but I'm also very aware of that challenge. And so I try very hard to live how I want and how I preach.
Right. It's so hard. Even with anybody that has a typical kid, it's so hard to think about the future or what that's going to look like.
Yes.
And especially for our kiddos that have 22q, there's so many diagnoses. There's 180 different things that could happen. And within each specialty, there are tons of different things that could happen, whether it's genetics or endocrine or
So
growth.
many what ifs.
So many. And it can be paralyzing if you
Yes. And
go
in
there.
the hospital it was. And it took time, but I don't feel paralyzed by that anymore, which is a very freeing feeling.
Good. And what, if you could go back in time to when you started your journey, and when let's say when you're in that hospital, she's been seizing, and you could go back in time into that room, what would you tell yourself in that moment?
I would tell myself, she's going to surprise you. Is not as scary of a world as it seems right now. And it is so important to focus on your individual child's diagnosis. We as a community obviously are here to support everyone with 22q or parents of 22q or wherever the case may be, but every individual with 22q is a unique diagnosis. Not one person is the same. And I just would tell myself that Izzy's diagnosis and what her path needs to be is what is prominent. But like I said, she's going to surprise you, and no need to worry, mama, because she's got this, even if you don't.
They are so strong, right? My son is very similar. Like, he's the strongest person I know.
Oh yes.
It's
like in all ways.
I love that. And any advice for parents listening that are maybe just got the diagnosis yesterday? What sort of advice would you give them?
That same advice, like find a support system. One, that's huge. If you don't have your own support system, reach out, because there's people like you and I who, I would love to be someone's support system if they needed me. But also, like I said, focus on your individual child's diagnosis, because it can be very overwhelming to, try and read things from the whole spectrum. So focus on what they need and ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to advocate and stand up for yourself and your child, because whether they don't have a voice yet or they can't have a voice, you need to be that voice. And you can find people who will be that voice with you or for you if you're not ready to take that. But
That's great. Great advice. And for someday when she listens to this, what would you want her to know?
Oh, I'm gonna cry. Just that she has changed my life for the better, and I'm very thankful. And she's very strong. She can get through anything.
She can get through anything, especially with you by her side. So
Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for sharing, and keep going. You're doing great work and you are making a difference. And for anyone that wants to check out the website, it will be in the description of this podcast, and reach out to Summerlee and her family. And I hope we stay in touch as well. And if there's anything we can do to help, let me know. But thank you again for having the strength to do this. And
thanks for
we
having
wish
me.
you nothing but the best of luck. Is there anything else you wanted to mention that I may not have touched upon?
A quick shout out to the 22Q Family Foundation, because through all of our ups and downs, I have used them as a resource for support. And whether it's just going on their Instagram and reading a similar story to Izzy's, they have been very helpful. They put on a wonderful conference that my sister and I attended in Columbus. And I'm thankful that there's other people out there doing the work for 22Q. So
we love the Family Foundation. So thanks for mentioning them. We'll definitely put them in the podcast too. But thank you again, Summerlee. It was such a joy meeting you. And I hope this isn't the last time we'll meet, but thank you again for everything.
Thank you.
Summerlee, thank you so much for sharing Izzy with me today. And I am just blown away by your passion and drive towards the 22Q community, and it truly is inspiring. So keep going. Good luck with the website. And if there's anything the 22Q podcast can do to help, please let me know. And for all of our listeners, thank you so much for listening and sharing this podcast. If you'd like to reach me, you can contact me at 22qpodcast@gmail.com with any questions, or if you're interested in being on this podcast, please feel free to reach out. And never forget, 22Q family, that you are not alone.